for joining us once more on the talk show. It's season 3, which is unbelievable because we never thought that we'd get this far with this show. And we have only done so because of you joining us in this conversation, helping us to talk about taboos. Before I start, I want to thank our location sponsor for this particular episode. We are at Brio in Battaramulla. It's an Italian cafe. It's closed down right now because they open up in the evenings, but they've let us use the space during the day. It's a lovely little space, and I'm looking forward to trying out their food later on. But thank you, Brio, for having us here. I would also like to thank from the bottom of our hearts from Team Shush, the Embassy of the Netherlands, who have come on board as a collaborator for this season. They believe in what we do. They want to help us speak out, and we have received a partnership by the embassy and a small grant that's going to help us do a lot more, a lot better. So thank you to them. Today, we're talking about something that's kind of reared its ugly head a lot more, especially during the COVID lockdown situations, which is online violence against children. This is a very real problem that we need to talk about. And the fact that it is such a huge problem, and there are so many reports of online violence against children, but when we at the show reached out to parents, we didn't want to put children on the show because we don't want to put minors on a public platform like this. But when we reached out to parents who have had experiences of their children having been violated or abused or harassed online, and we asked them if they'd like to come and share their experiences, nobody really wanted to. Everybody was too afraid, which makes me believe this is a taboo. There is such a stigma around this subject for some reason. A lot of parents are not willing to come forward, and that's why I'm so grateful right now to have these two ladies who have joined us. And Tush is actually, she's an activist, but more importantly, she's a mom. So she has her expertise as well as her own shared experience that I'm so grateful that she's vocal and strong and brave enough to talk about this with no fear and no shame. And I know there are a lot of parents out there who are going to need her voice to help their own. And then we have Dharini, who just told me like fun, she's been working on cyber violence specifically with the Grassrooted Trust. Thank you for being here as well, because my experience, like I said, is very little. And I know from little bits of involvement that I've had with the NCPA, the National Child Protection Authority, and just little bits here and there where I've spoken to parents who have reached out saying, this has happened to my child. Either they've been bullied or stalked or hacked in or, harassed or whatever. What do I do? And at that point, really, I also haven't known what to tell them. I've just signposted them. Okay, call Bakamoon, call the NCPA, talk to CERT, but it really needs somebody who's been there to talk about it.
This happened in 2018 in January in what is called a leading international school, where this wasn't the first time that it had happened. It has happened many times before, where children are being forced to kneel down. Tokka, pulling off the hair, tugging, slapping, all of those and worse has happened in that school. And I have time and time again reported, even if it wasn't for my child, when I see it happening to another, I have reported it, and I've always asked numerous times on 3 things. One was that we needed an open and transparent complaints mechanism, which the school does not have. 2, that teachers must undergo compulsory child psychology training. And 3, that the school must adopt a safeguarding policy. But unfortunately, they never did, and we'd been in that school for almost 8 years. And on that fateful day, my child and 8 other children were forced to kneel down because my daughter, actually, she was only 11 at the time, and they were forced to kneel down because they forgot to bring the weekly reading book. Okay? And not only were they forced to kneel down, their ears were pulled and shamed amongst their peers. But I never knew this. This had happened on a Friday. I never knew this because my daughter considered it to be the norm. And so she never reported it back after she came from school. But on the weekend, I overheard her speaking to my son, Aya, saying, Aya, this boy was laughing at me, and they were saying these things, and that she actually didn't want to kneel down. So she had resisted. And because she resisted, there was a little bit more force on getting her to kneel. So when I heard this, I actually went a bit nuts because no, that's enough. This is like almost like public crucifixion. This cannot be. And then on the Monday, so I spoke to my daughter, and on the Monday we went as usual with her, met the principal, and gave another formal letter. Again, there's nothing mentioned in the letter about chasing any teachers out or punishing any teachers, but the same 3 principles that I've been asking over and over again, the 3 points. And the first thing I get is no, can't be, and this is precisely why I wanted, I was promoting an open complaints mechanism. And even if you go to a bank here or any kind of institution in Sri Lanka, if you want to make a complaint, you become the social pariah. They think you're the wrong person. There is no.
I think that's kind of even the premise of this show is the fact that people don't want to speak out or complain because they don't want the fear of critique, the fear of judgment.
Precisely.
Attention is a bad thing because it is, So
there was this almost a denial, and then we will look into it, we will call the sir. But then it didn't happen to my liking. 1 week to 10 days down the line, that nothing happened. And then finally, when I got to meet the sir face to face with the principal, I didn't like the way the conversation was going. That it was being normalized, it was being justified. There was no remedial measure saying yes, we will do X, Y, and Z. At which point I thought, okay, I'm going to make my stand and I'm going to go to the police. I've never gone to a police station. I didn't know what I was doing.
You went to the police in Sri Lanka to talk about making a child kneel. I would love to know how that was.
Well,
how they actually addressed
it wasn't actually so much the fact that the child had to kneel. It was the enforcement of it. The fact that the child was ashamed at home and saying, to the brother, how embarrassed she was and how she did not enjoy it. And that's the bit that I didn't like. So when I went to the police, true, දනගහන එකට මොකටද පොලිසියට එන්නේ. But it was a point that I wanted it to stop. I really didn't want it to carry on anymore. I went to the police, I made a complaint. Of course, I never knew who the other kids were, so then my daughter had to go and make another complaint. And then there's an inquiry held, to which the chairman of the school never came, but the principal and the teacher came. And then suddenly the teacher on the spot says, "Hari mage waradda mama aswenna." And that wasn't what I asked. But I did come to an agreement with the understanding, signed and sealed, that the school will adopt a safeguarding policy. That's all I wanted. So on the premise that the principal will liaise with the chairperson and introduce a safeguarding policy, I decided and agreed that this matter will no longer go through. So that was it. සමතයකට පත් වුණා. The backlash happened the very moment they stepped out of school at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So there was this open and public announcement made by the principal in the car park. It was a car park playground, where parents and students were. It's almost a common area where she comes and bowls her eyes off and says, so and so has gone to the police and brought disrepute to our school. Now because of her, we've lost a good teacher, etc., etc., etc.
So they were accusing your child or you?
Both.
Yeah. Okay.
They then got those other 8 children. Now this is almost like 2.5 weeks later, right? I mean, we've come to a settlement. Everything was done. 2.5 weeks later, the principal then calls one child at a time, those who were kneeling down, to give a statement to the principal at such a late date. Okay, but not my child. Okay, and every time those kids came back, they didn't talk to my daughter. So my daughter was being isolated the entire day. And even their little ones, 11-year-olds. So even as one child came to talk to Adriana, I don't mind saying her name, Adriana, someone will always come and say, no, don't talk, madam will shout, you know, and they would drag her away. So
Yeah.
my daughter was a little smart, so she understood what was going on. And she was isolated the entire day, no one to talk to, no one to play with, no one to eat with. And she went for after school club as well till 3 o'clock, and still there was no one. And she came home in an absolute state of mental distress. And I still remember this vision, and to my death I will take this vision, where my daughter was lying on bed like a fetus, bawling her eyes out for about 3-4 hours unconsolably. And I will never forget that image ever
Do you want
in
to
my
take a
life.
break? Do you want
No,
to take a
I'll
break?
carry on if I
You
stop.
sure?
Yeah. So the bullying just didn't happen just physically. Bullying then went on to online. First they started a sticker campaign. Then they set up a WhatsApp group, which I was
So this is the school or the
School.
parents?
with the endorsement of the school authorities. The parents and the teachers were doing this. They were using the school emblem, so you cannot use the school emblem without having the school authority.
Yeah.
So that's a dead giveaway. And a WhatsApp group. So basically calling me a bad mother. She's looking for perks.
Looking for a fight.
No, perks.
Okay.
Looking for, she's a privileged bitch. Why should she do that? Why should we listen to her? We all our children can get punished. We don't care. Why should she be any different? That sort of thing. Then they went on to the official alumni Facebook page, where the chairman, we don't know who, but the school had given a letter completely sort of finding fault with me, saying this mother is giving us hell. She's created a lot of problems. They actually asked me to take my kids out of school. First they stopped me from talking to the teachers, then they asked me to stop coming to the school, then they wanted to speak to my husband only, who lives overseas, then they asked me to take my kids to the Colombo school, then they asked me to take the kids out completely. And the bullying and the intimidation online was so severe that they even set up a separate website. And the only thing that was on this website was that letter that was issued from the school dissing me. Okay. And finally, after months and months of not just aggressiveness, rudeness, filth, everything you can imagine as a mother, as a child, calling her names, calling my son, everything. I finally had to go to Witness and Victims Protection Authority to protect my children, because the police was doing nothing, the school was doing nothing. By this time I had already made a complaint to National Child Protection Authority and a case was going on, but they were doing nothing. So I had to go to Witness and Victims Protection Authority, and this particular post was the most popular post with over 2,000 shares, over 600 comments, over however many views or whatever. But all throughout the alumni, the history of this Facebook, it had never had such a response than this.
But how this thing snowballed, right?
Yes.
It's starting with being made to kneel in the school to this is like a completely different nightmare. And I know that this happened even last year because I was tracking the story of the girl who she on one of these popular shows, the singing shows, The Voice. There was a girl who
Aditya.
yeah, she won over somebody else. She was selected, and then there was such a huge backlash about that online. What is it that makes us kind of switch off our sensitivity towards children when we get online? Because the amount of bullying, the amount of harassment, and it's not just, you think when you say online violence against children, people assume, yes, largely it is sexual violence against children. There are pedophiles, there are perpetrators online. But this bullying, the kind of the insults, the aggressive commentary that happens from adults.
I think it's the fact that it's normalized, right? When you look
Yeah.
at a child as an adult, you don't see that child as a person who deserves respect, because respect is something that we give to like an adult or someone who's older. So whether it's online, especially online, you look at a child and it's like, this is someone I can judge and criticize because I'm older than you, and therefore I have the authority to say whatever I want. Especially as parents, as adults, I think a lot of us expect parents to, you know, protect the kid or
Yeah.
love the kid,
Yeah.
but nobody expects the parent to respect the kid, because again, you're not supposed to respect your kid, you're supposed to love them, you're supposed to protect them. When you're respective of your child and their boundaries, you become a Western mother. Respecting a child is not a Western ideal or a concept, it's a human
Yeah.
thing.
I think violence in itself, whether it's aggressiveness verbally or physically, has become the norm in Sri Lanka. So with that, the normalization of violence and the aggression is so much so that the electronic space that we live in is almost like a virtual bubble, and we know that if we say something wrong and someone retaliates, it's very easy, you just block them. Then have you ever noticed on some of these chats, you make a comment, somebody might not like what you're commenting, then suddenly there are about 3 or 4 other people having a go at you. It's almost like a conversation within a conversation. Then another one starts within a conversation, another conversation. That just shows that the kind of mentality that they have out in society, where, you know, the gangster style, the club, you know, the boys club style, or the, you know, that intimidation that goes on in real life is what's happening here. Invariably, they know each other. Most of them kind of cling on because they know each other. So then it's harassment within harassment. Yes,
right?
yes.
It's like racism and
Yeah.
all
Yes.
sorts of other things, you know, when one worm comes out of the woodwork, all the other worms join in because,
And then-
ooh, there's
Yes.
somebody who's saying what
Yes.
we want to
and
say.
they like
Yeah.
it. They like the likes, the laugh.
What are the protections available for online violence against children in Sri Lanka at the moment, because you work
Yeah.
specifically in this space?
I mean, we can talk about the protections that are available, but the fact that they are not implemented or followed is
Yeah,
the issue. So,
yeah.
for example, we have to look at it in a realistic way, right? And you mentioned that when you were talking about that specific incident. So, if you are being bullied online, as a child, the ideal place to go is, of course, the NCPA, the National Child Protection Authority. But we have to think about what is the case. Are they going to be helpful? So if I'm under 18, the best place is there, because regardless of whether you go to the police or not, there are 2 institutions that are responsible for handling cases of this nature. So if you're above 18, you're an adult, it's the CID Cyber Crimes Branch. So even if I go to the police, at the end of the day, I will, you know, go here and there and end up there, because those are the institutions that have the authority as well as the resources to deal with cases of this nature.
Okay.
So, but the problem is, how are the people in these institutions dealing with, you know, cases of cyber violence, especially against children? So, for example, it's very interesting to see how their definition of cyber violence. So, for example, if I am taking a case of child pornography, right? It's a 11-year-old, 7-year-old who has been abused. They're like, okay, this is interesting, this is important, and they deal with it. But if it's a 16, 17-year-old whose nudes have been exploited, then it's like, so this is more like you asked for this.
Were your children aware of what was happening online with these Facebook pages and
Yes,
websites?
after
and all?
some time, I did stop them from looking at them. But whatever was happening online was being verbalized in school. So if
Yeah.
they, for instance, if they were standing in a queue to go into a class or something like this, your mother, no? Your mother is like this, you know, and so said this, and why your sister, why can't she kneel? You know, my mother says this, my father says this. So they were getting it.
So they knew that there were Facebook pages and websites
Oh,
and all
yes,
that were
yes.
attacking the family.
Yes, they knew.
Because that can be like, I mean, okay, say as a mom, as an adult, you understand, okay, this is the cycle that got us here or whatever it is. I mean, but then your child doesn't know why it's happening to them.
No. Then they knew, because the bullying extended so much so that it actually, my daughter was diagnosed, Adriana was diagnosed as being 3 times by 3 independent throughout 2 years as being severe mental abuse. That was the formal diagnosis given. She dropped out of school for a while. Her grades came down. She was constantly having tummy aches and not wanting to go to school. Both my children were national tennis players, top 10 nationwide. My daughter stopped going to tennis. My son, they bullied him so much that they stopped him. They gave him a fail mark in maths deliberately just before the O levels.
Even if it's offline violence, something happens, it's the girl or the victim. Why did you do it?
Why did you wear the short dress to
Yeah,
get
short
sexually
dress.
harassed?
Why did you go out alone? Why were you drunk? Why were you there? Why are you breathing? So yeah, that's a culture. That's something we've normalized because it's easy to blame the person who was affected than to blame the person who perpetrated the violence. I find it very ironic that victims are shushed, but the perpetrators go around and boast about what they do, like, oh, I got this girl's nudes, or, you know, I harassed someone, or I made this comment, and look at, you know, this person, everyone's laughing at them. Why is it that when they kind of boast about the disgusting thing that they did, that's okay? That's like pora, or in Tamil it's gettu, or it's like cool. But when a victim talks
dude.
about what she, like, dude, macham, bro, this is great, right?
Yeah.
But when a victim talks about what they went through, they're like, shh, no, you're not supposed to talk. So I can't emphasize how many cases we get to Bakamono where it's a child who can't talk to the parent. So many kids, I'm saying verbatim, saying the sentence, if I tell my parents, they'll kill me. And the fact that the kids believe that to be
Yeah.
like true,
Yeah.
the fact that they legitimately think that the parents will harm them if they talk about their emotions.
And I think from a few cases that I've heard about, I might be wrong, the parents have acted very aggressively
They have,
towards the
they
child when they have found out that the child is being
and also
violated
the
online.
fact that in your daughter's case, imagine the other girls or boys in the school who witnessed this and the message that goes to their heads. We are kind of moving from a legal and institutional perspective. This issue of the police treating victims or children, especially with such, you know, lack of empathy, is being kind of taken into consideration. So, for example, right now, Women in Need, which is an organization that works on gender-based violence, they developed an SOP, a standard of procedure for law enforcement, like the police,
Yeah.
to specifically deal with instances of online violence. So that shows the fact that this has been recognized as an issue.
But is it being followed?
Exactly, that's the thing. Again, now because of COVID and all of that, it's deprioritized. It's not an issue. Like, we are not going to, the police is not going to make it a priority to train their staff on being sensitive during taking complaints on this very specific issue. But they kind of ignore the fact that, like you said in the beginning, online violence has been increasing because of, you know, our
Online usage is
online usage, and it is the perfect time to have this discussion, to have this training, to sensitize police. But again, it's not a priority, it's not a concern. And the fact that kids, I mean, can you imagine a child who is so scared to talk to their own parent? How can they go and talk to the police? How can they go and talk to like a stranger? Or even when they talk to me on the phone, when they talk about the case, there's so much shame. And
Yeah.
that's self-stigma, because they, even before they have told someone, they've been taught to believe that you asked for this. This is your fault. You shouldn't have done this. And the fact that no one said anything and you've already believed this to be true is really concerning. Something I learned when I was working with schools is how some schools have counselors, right? And it's great because some schools don't have counselors who offer psychological counseling. So the counselors, I was asking the kids if there's an issue. And this was, of course, we were talking about online violence. And I was like, if you're bullied online, can you go and talk to the counselor? And the kids said no. And from what I knew, the counselor was decent and was qualified and all of that. And their answer was that the route to the counselor's office was visible. So if I go to see the counselor, people can see, it's
them.
the only office in that flow, that area. So if I go through that corridor, people know I am going to see the counselor. And kids didn't want that. They're
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be seen in the corridor. And I was like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
And that's
The shame.
Exactly. So when, for example, if I'm a principal or a, you know, director of an educational institution, that's not something I think about.
Yeah.
The position or the location of the counselor's room. But that shows that kids think differently, like what influences their decision making. They, even though there was a very much qualified counselor to talk to, they didn't want to go because of that corridor.
I think that's actually, I mean, even in the case of offline abuse with children and all of that, a lot of the time they don't want further attention on themselves, right? And they do it's all about belonging to the community, be the peer approval. You don't want to be the one who's different from everyone else. You want to be seen as, like I said, I've collaborated with the NCPA on a project, but even with that, now you have the 1929 hotline, which is to call and report child abuse. And I know recently an app version of the hotline was launched, so that children would find it easier to report rather than calling the hotline, because they found that according to the NCPS statistics, children know 1929, but they don't call 1929 because they don't want to talk to an adult. They don't want to be identified. They don't want, it going to the parents. And somehow they felt this app would give a child as kind of a feeling of comfort or anonymity in reporting. So it's available out there. There is an app, the 1929 Child Protection app. Right now it's available on Android. By the time you watch this show, it might be on iOS as well. But I still think, having gone through the app myself, I still don't know whether it's a child friendly.
Yeah, even the 1929 line itself is not.
Yeah,
because,
the whole process is there's
too.
so much of red tape and such a load of steps to go through that it just gets a little intimidating and overwhelming for anyone reporting.
And we have to stop looking at cyberbullying or whatever as a Colombo-based Western posh issue. No, I was in Pudukudiyiruppu last year, 2019, and this was a place where they still had landmines. They were like, be careful when you walk, these are places with landmines, we still haven't removed. It was that remote. But they still had cases of online violence. Yeah. And in that case, they had to travel to Colombo because, like I said, you can go to the police, but it's never resolved there. You need the resources, whether for tracking or identifying a stalking case, anything at all, you need to come to Colombo. And who's going to do that? Who's going to come to Colombo from Jaffna or Galle or Kandy to make a complaint? And the fact that when you come here, how are you going to talk? What's the language? They don't, for example, for a nude, they don't say Niruvat Pinture, they say Asabhya Pinture. So there itself, you're shaming the picture and saying, this is porn, this is porn, this is not okay. So the fact that there's so much to look at, right?
Yeah.
From the access to the training to the sensitivity, it's just there's so much work to do, and that's why at Grassrooted, of course, while we work with the institutions like NCPA and CID, we work with parents because fixing the system is going to take forever, right? It's a work in progress. There's always going to be an issue. But if we can individually make sure the school takes responsibility or the parent takes responsibility, that's so much better, because in cases of cyber violence, what we've noticed is the main threat is the blackmail by saying, I'll post this on the internet or tell your parents. So I am being blackmailed by using my own parents. So for example, if you're threatening me saying you'll tell my mother, if I can talk to my mother about the fact that you're threatening me, you can't threaten me anymore. You have no power over me because I have a support system. So that's what we need to build, a support system for the child, so the child can say, no, you can't blackmail me. I might not go to the police, that's whatever, but I will tell my parents. My parents will hold you accountable for what you're doing. We don't have that.
Yeah, but also we have this thing of, if a child comes and says there's something happening to me online,
Don't believe that child as well.
more than don't believe, you might, as a lot of parents do it,
Take away the phone.
Take away the internet.
Yeah.
The first thing you do is block the child, the nanny protection or whatever, you take away the child's internet privileges.
So CERT got 85, if I'm not correct, 80 odd complaints in 2010 about online social media issues. And when they say issues, it's bullying, sexual abuse, all of that. In 2017, just 7 years after, they got 3,685 cases. And if you look at the graph, it just keeps going up. Every year it's increasing. And now...
And it's 2020 with more online
it's
usage.
Definitely more. But the concern here is, number one, how many people know of CERT? That it's an organization where you can go and complain, right? Secondly, how many of us are comfortable enough to go and make a complaint? So when you think of 3,685 cases, that's a lot, right? It might not be, 10,000, but it's still a lot. When it comes to social media bullying, the first attempt is to report to Facebook or Instagram. And like you said, it's blocking, right? I never encourage blocking, as it's only a last resort, because what happens when you block someone is that you get rid of that person personally. Of course, they come back, that's another thing. But that person goes back and bullies someone else.
Someone else,
So you
yeah.
should always report. You can definitely block them, nothing wrong with that, but always report and
And
then
also
block.
screenshot everything they do.
Of course.
Screenshot.
Save evidence, because even if you go to Facebook, even if you come to Bakamono to report it, to go to CID, you need evidence. You need evidence to show that this happened to me, this is the profile. And I mean, that's protocol, right, in any reporting institution. And the other statistic that is incredibly depressing is they did this was a Colombo based study about cyberbullying, and they asked the kids a question: who are you going to report to? Who will you talk to if you're bullied online? And only 2% of the sample said parents and teachers. That's 2%, and around 60% of them said friends. So if I'm a 14-year-old child, what is my other 14-year-old peer going to do about it? When we do a workshop, I always show that and say, this is the amount of trust your kids have in you. And the fact that when we ask the kids, because that was a quantitative study, when we do, discussions with children, we always ask, so why do you not want to talk to the teachers? The question is, yeah, they're going to go and say it to someone else. The lack of confidentiality is the issue, and kids get that, right? Kids talk to each other. So if I get bullied and I go to my science teacher and she doesn't help me, the other kids are going to know about it. We had a case, I think a couple of years ago, where this kid was in some boyfriend issue and the parents confiscated the phone. It's funny, it's a little bit funny when I think about it. The best friend of the victim stole 30,000 rupees from her parents to buy their friend a phone.
Okay.
And I was like, first of all, I appreciate your friendship here. Wish I had friends like that, but it's a case study for the parents. Look at the amount of, effort that has been taken to make sure this kid stays online. And it's also a different mechanism. So we were in Batticaloa, Hans and I were in Batticaloa for a while, and we got a case study where there's a trend in Batticaloa where kids either don't have access to phones because of economic issues or because of parental control. There are communications that rent phones on an hourly basis. So what I do is I go to the communication, I give my ID or I give the money, and I get the phone when I go to school. I keep it for like 5 hours and I come back and I pay you like whatever the amount is. And what happened here was the people in the shops, of course the kid doesn't understand, there's no PIN number, no, it's not a private phone. So the people in the communication started taking the information, videos that were there, chats. You don't necessarily have to send a nude video to be exploited. I remember when I was in school, I was talking to my boyfriend, and my friend was like, what if he shows the chat to your parents? Like, talking to a boy or talking to a stranger itself is enough to blackmail someone, depending on the family, depending on the background, all of that. So these screenshots from these communication shops were like used to exploit these kids. So taking away the phone, confiscating the phone, taking away internet, even though with the 2020 atmosphere, it's still not okay. It's never okay because you're making it worse.
Sometimes it's not even the child doing anything, it's Facebook pages and groups that are putting up pictures of children. Like there are schoolgirls, I've seen groups that are created by bunches of men who put up these unsolicited, non-consensual pictures of school children, and the kind of commentary on those groups, it's like horrifying, because it's these, I don't know, these sex-starved, perverse men. Just I can't even, nothing comes to my mouth also just to say like the kind of things that they say about these pictures of schoolgirls who have no idea that their photo has been taken and has been put up.
I saw a Facebook page called Sri Lankan Kellange Kakul. It's just calves, like it's just legs and knees and ankles, and I was like, what's wrong with you? But the problem with the pages is two things, right? Number one, it's used as an excuse to get kids off the internet, saying if you go to Facebook, look at these pages, look at these people. don't go on Facebook. This is what's wrong with Facebook. So we blame Facebook for these pages, but it's not Facebook. Facebook wasn't created so we can have Sri Lankan Kellange Kakul, right? It was created so people can talk. So again, we hold technology and social media responsible for the violence instead of
society.
the people. Like the
and
fact that there are 70,000, 100,000 people liking these pages, commenting on these
Yeah.
profiles and posts, that's concerning. And the other thing is, while we do that, while we say, hey, it's you, you have to be individually responsible and respectful, it's also very important to hold Facebook and other social media platforms accountable. They have this algorithm that kind of automatically tracks these kind of posts and pages. The problem with that is, one, it's in English, so it only kind of captures things like, so for example, if it says something rude in English, it'll be like, oh, this is against the community standards, and it'll take it down. The other problem with that is that a lot of the Sri Lankan pages are in
Sinhalese.
Sinhala and Tamil. This was a while ago, right? So it's in Tamil alphabet or Sinhala alphabet, and Facebook identified that. And what they did is, I always feel like they let us do their work. So they reached out to a lot of community organizations and they said, can you give us a list of words that are like offensive? And we were like, bro, that's like,
that just keeps changing.
yeah,
also.
and also it's context, right? Like Sri Lankan Kellange Kakul is not an offensive thing, but it's still, the page is horrible. So we made the list and we sent it to them, and they blocked those words. And yeah, great initiative, thank you. But we have to think about the fact that perpetrators always find a way also to kind of, you know, jump over that fence. So what they started doing was they made the pages in phonetical language. So instead of writing in Sinhala alphabet, they wrote it in English, like Sri Lankan Kellange kiyanne KEL.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they say that is not going to get caught by the algorithm.
Yeah.
So what Facebook does now, because in order to, you can't fix that, they have this thing called the Trusted Partner Channel.
Whitelisted
Yeah.
organization.
There are, so Bakamuno is one of those organizations where if we report it, it gets automatically noticed. So they're like, oh, it's from this organization. So but even we have to explain the case and say, this is the situation, these are the community guidelines that have been, you have to like quote shit. Like you have to say this community guideline, 7 has been violated and all of that. And it does get taken down most of the time. Even sometimes they get back and say, it doesn't violate or there isn't sufficient evidence and all of that. But the problem is the fact that we have to be an intermediary. Why are we doing that? You are a multi-billion organization that can afford to train people, that can afford to recruit people. What about people who don't know of Bakamuno or other trusted partner organizations? How are they going to report? I don't have to report my post 1,000 times or ask all my, that's the thing, right? You report it and then you ask your friends to report it, then you ask your friends' friends to report it,
Yeah.
it still doesn't get taken down. But the fact that when an intermediary comes in, it's almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
The fact that you need such support
Yeah.
to kind of take off a simple picture that violates your consent and privacy as well as the guidelines of Facebook.
200,000 children go online every day, and 800 million are actively using social media. So taking away internet privileges is not going to stop this issue of violence online, because unless your 800 million parents are going to take away internet privileges from their children, this is going to continue happening. An estimated 750,000 individuals are looking to connect with children for sexual purposes online. Let that sink in. An estimated, which means the numbers could obviously be that much more, because you're estimating based on surveys or whatever you found online. So right now, at any point of time, if your child is online, there are 750,000 minimum people who are looking to connect with your child for sexual purposes. You cannot take children off the internet. You have to make the internet safer for children. Child sexual abuse is captured through images and videos that are being shared online. There are currently more than 46 million unique images or videos of child sexual abuse material. And a lot of it, I think, when we did the show on pornography, when we did the episode on pornography, when I did the research, and I went into porn sites, there was so much of content from Sri Lanka with children in those videos. Children who had no idea. Some of them had been drugged. It was horrifying, but it's there. And children being used for sexual material and sexual narratives. 91% of child sexual abuse material depicts children under 13 years of age. So it's not even children who are active online. Okay. How do we make the internet safer? How do we make our children a little more wary? Because kids are kids, right? What you tell them not to do is exactly what they want to experiment.
So when this thing happened with my daughter, the first thing I did was to make her aware that there are things called child rights, how to be safe, and the basics of child rights. And if anybody is interested, there's a very beautiful, simple, cartoony type child rights poster on our website, www.stopchildcruelty.com. Go to resources on there and you will find this poster. Even though it doesn't specifically talk about online violence, it actually tells about how to be safe, that being safe is a right that a child has, that they don't need to be intimidated, afraid, etc., etc. So if I was able to then empower my child that way and be able for her to stand up for her own rights and to say to a teacher no afterwards, I think we can do exactly the same with online as well, similar to what they're doing in the UK, where they're actually saying, even before you come into school, they're giving us this is our child protection policy, and there's a section in there about being safe online. And if you don't want to speak to your parents, we are there for you, come and talk to us. So you're making a bridge of communication for that child. So that's number one. So there's two things there, making the child aware of how to be safe. And number three is actually, there are ways other than reporting to be safe. As parents, you can do certain blocking and restrictions online where they can't go. I'll tell you a scenario where my son didn't have a mobile phone until he was 16, and that was only 2 years ago. So when he was 13, he asked us for a phone, and we said, can you name 3 people that you are not going to meet for more than 48 hours, that you have to speak, and then we'll buy you a phone. So he couldn't come up with anyone that he wouldn't meet for 48 hours, and he actually gave 4 names of the same child. This child had 4 names. So he from the tennis club in Colombo, who he was only going to be meeting twice a week. So he actually said, Kevin, Arthur, Sarah, Dada. He said the 4 names of this particular child. So I think we have to take responsibility as parents. If you're giving somebody an instrument, technology-wise, we also need to be responsible in order to protect our children, to put in those boundary lines. Some of the time we as parents are afraid to impose those boundaries because we don't want to be the baddies. In my family, I'm the baddie, I'm the bad cop, forever I'm the bad cop. So I think we can set those boundaries. And also there are times when you know that your child is almost hooked, something like TikTok. Okay, yes, it's entertainment. Yes, they are supposed to be using at a certain duration of time, but when they get hooked, that they are so addicted to it that they can't get away from it. There's got to be something more than fun, something that lures them into it, and it's often for children something that is naughty, okay, in their minds or in ours.
Yes, it's exciting when it's taboo.
Yes, right. So you can put restrictions on time limits on how much they can use this for. There are apps on their phones. I'm doing it from here. When they're not studying, when my husband calls and says, here, talk to your child, he hasn't done the homework, I actually do it from here. I restrict her mobile phone or the internet or Wi-Fi or whatever, which we can do. Of course, it's not a solution long term, but they understand. But that communication really must come from all involved with children. So those are a few tips that I can.
And what about you, in your experience? How do you actually talk to teenagers? How do you make them a little bit more aware? I've been at a workshop where, again, this could be just that particular individual's attitudes or whatever, but where I've been talking to a classroom full of girls, where I did something on being safe online, about Instagram, about putting up your photos on Instagram, you know, sexualizing yourself. It can be misused. You have the right to put up whatever you want. It's your body, your right. But you have to be aware that this is the way certain people can misinterpret, and they can use your pictures, and they can abuse you, exploit you. And I said that with all good intention, because this trend of girls wanting to, you know, show off everything and be sexualized, they get off on it, and it's like, be careful. And then I just got this, it's my body, it's my business, what do you care? So I thought about that. I was like, how do you talk to teenagers
Ah, talking to teenagers is my favorite thing.
about don't send that nude to that boy?
It's I and we at Grassrooted, we never use the phrase don't send the nude, don't do this, because we often tell children what not to do instead
Yeah.
of telling them what to do.
Yeah.
So we give the negative but not the positive. So instead of saying don't do this, we
Be
say,
aware of the
yeah,
consequences.
here's what you can do. You can do it or not do it, that's up to you. So that's giving them the autonomy to choose. So what we do is we share case studies, we show examples and say this is what, it's not scaring them, because what we do is scare them. Say, if you do this, this is what will happen, your life will be ruined, blah blah blah. No, that will just scare them off the internet of making friends. That's
Or they just don't
yeah,
believe you anymore.
yeah, exactly.
until
Or they're like, oh, you're ruining my life.
Yeah.
We give them or trust them to make that choice by giving them the information that is needed, and then giving them the resources that they might need to cope with it. It's about giving the child the choice and the responsibility to be sensible online, because it is about decision making, right? It's about showing good judgment, it is about trusting people online and offline. So it's about, okay, this is what will happen, this might happen, might not happen, your body, your choice. But remember that the internet is a large space and you meet different, it's about having a chat like this. It's not giving like, this is the internet, if you do this, this will
Making
happen.
them realize of the consequences.
Exactly. And you will be held accountable for those consequences. And also, I think talking to teenagers, unfortunately, when it comes to cyber violence, we always talk to the girls. It is about being safe online, but not about
Yeah, you don't
being
teach the boys.
respectful
Yeah,
online.
very right.
And even with any type of violence, we often address the victims and empower the victims. Ask the perpetrator to shut up. Like, ask them to.
No, I'm very happy you said that, because I do know that even boys have their secret WhatsApp groups, or their, you know, where they're sharing pictures of their girlfriends and this and that, and these are young boys who, I don't think we can excuse it in this day and age, saying they don't know better.
Yeah.
How do we protect our children as a community? What can we do?
In terms of the government, there are like simple things they can do. Obviously, making better response mechanisms, training the police, that's a huge thing. That's, of course, needs to be done. But think about simple things like ICT is a compulsory subject, right? Until grade 9. Put social media safety into like one chapter. All like
Curriculum.
I look at people, I'm like, one chapter, that's all I ask. Just one chapter on basic things like privacy, setting your profile on private mode, because kids don't know that. A lot of kids who are not, you know, they don't have language access, whatever, they don't know that. So imagine like the difference it would make if my teacher teaches me about online safety, because all they teach in ICT, from what I remember, is like diagrams and MS Word. Great, but we have to adapt to the reality. That's one thing. And parents, in terms of talking about this education, should demand the schools to take that initiative. Go and talk to your health education teacher or your ICT teacher about this, instead of just focusing on the maths teacher and the English literature teacher and the science teacher.
We also need to be able to voice and say enough is enough. We need to be able to stop other bullies as parents, whether it's on a public forum or a private group or whatever it is. If we see, no matter how right or wrong it is towards the child, whatever the child has done, when you see people ganging up on a child, when that child is being abused and harassed, please have the decency to put yourself, think of it as your child and protect that child, at least to stop that from happening, you know. Next, report it. I mean, I am forever reporting. You know, there are many women who say nasty things about me, but I have actually gone and reported when things happen against them. So we can report it. Obviously, how practical that is, we don't know, but we still cannot stop. Okay. Number 4, it needs to be part of the curriculum. Sex education needs to be on the curriculum. You know, and don't listen to the monks, please. You know, we need to try and get this back on the show. And last of all, empower your child. Your child can say no. Your child needs to be able to say no. When somebody asks for a nude, your child needs to be able to say no. When somebody says, you know, show us your leg, send us a photo of your leg, your child needs to be able to say no. So you need to be able to empower your child. My daughter is now 14. And even yesterday, as I was talking to her, I was like, Nanga, I'm away. How do you feel about Mama being away? And I asked her, if you have an issue, who do you talk to? You know, you need to be able to have that communication bridge somewhere, somehow. And last of all, you know, hey, there are a lot of places in Sri Lanka that you can go to. Don't stop going to these places. Keep using them. It's only then that we can make it better. The police, the CERT, the victims and witness protection, the courts, use them. That's what they're there for. Even though we say, oh, what's the point, it's not going to be of any benefit, it's corrupt, to, you know, challenge the system. It's only then that we can move on. And then if it doesn't work, go to UNHRC,
which is what you've done.
Yes. So we now have, it's got nothing to do with cyberbullying, but this is in global perspective of being a child protection on violence against children, that we have now taken. My daughter is now the youngest citizen of Sri Lanka, and I have looked at other case studies, and I haven't found any other child who has taken the government, not this particular government, governments I should say, because since we've signed up in 1991 to the UNCRC, we have failed all our children. So this is a case against successive governments that have failed to protect our children, and she is now the youngest citizen who's taking the baton on for child protection.
2 things we identified as concerning issues in Sri Lankan young people is number 1, video gaming. We found that a lot of especially boys spend like 12 hours on a weekend on certain video games, and that's concerning. Because yes, entertainment is great, we should encourage that, but 12 hours is not normal.
So I have a little tip for parents on that one. That you can put all your mobile phones, including the parents and the children's, outside in a common basket, and then go off to sleep, so that the kids don't take your phones to bed. The limitations that I put when I know that they are not studying or, you know, being addicted, so you turn off the Wi-Fi, or you turn off on the phone itself, you can put that it goes off the Wi-Fi limitations. There are many apps that you can choose.
All those little things that you do, when you do that, explain it to the kid. Instead of just being like doing the thing, I'm like, okay, now I'm monitoring you, or it's done because you know, I watched a TV program and they said we should do that. Tell them what you've done to the phone, tell them what you've done to the computer, so they understand. So they're like not scared of using it, not scared of going online.
Actually, these were instructions that came with the school. When we put them to school, these were
But I
instructions.
think our schools also should start having these advisories, and like you said, putting it into their curriculum. Even privately, it doesn't have to come from the government.
Yeah.
If that's going to take another month of Sundays to do,
Yeah.
the school itself can take the initiative.
That's why the parents should go and be like, do it.
Just to let you know, watch out for these kinds of cyber violators. Teach your kids, have conversations with your kids, start respecting your kids so that they also give you the respect back when you do ask them to be a little more careful. If you want to find out more, if you want places that you can go to for help, just like Tush said, there are organizations, there are institutes. We will be listing out all of this in the description below this episode on YouTube. But Tush's organization,
www.stopchildcruelty.com website, which has a host of information on everything you need to know about child protection from Sri Lanka to international, as well as the Facebook and all the other social media that goes with it.
So I would say Bakamono for online violence or any sort of gender-based violence. You can go there for information on different types of online violence, who should I talk to, what are the social media protocols, and it's trilingual. So whether you're in Tamil or Sinhala, whatever language you want, and there are resources for parents, teachers and kids separately. So please make use of it.
Also, there is CERT, like we talked about. CERT CERT is a place that you can write to and inform if you need to report something. The NCPA is where child violence should be reported. The NCPA's hotline is 1929, and they now have an app version of that, 1929 Child Protection app, where your children can report on their own and actually empower themselves to be a little more careful with themselves.
What I know is parents are like parents nowadays. What they would do is they would say, don't do that. When you say eka karan nepa, and when you say like don't do that, then they tend to like do it, because that's the normal how do you say that, mentality of children. So that's the thing. So you need to be careful how you teach them and how you enforce that to them. So I think in the episode also the doctor said that they have like a time where they keep all the phones away, and where they have some time for themselves, which we also do, which we just started recently. And at that time, like, everything is nothing, no mobile phones, nothing. We just keep them to a side and we just go out, we play. We have like at least 2 to 3 hours, which we are slowly by slowly we want to increase. So because it's something new to us as well, right? I mean, something always that is new, that has a change, takes time. So it takes a little bit of time to build on that.